The pass was silent except for wind. Before dawn, with frost still clinging to pine needles, the courier waited in the notch between two ridgelines east of Lake Biwa. Kyoto lay 3 valleys west. The first packet rested against his skin, sealed in wax, no visible script. Instead, a thin brush mark curled like reed smoke on its edge, a signal only a trained courier from the IGA Kōga border would read. He was not called by name today. The name he used here shifted with the hour, like cloak colors in lantern light. In the last market town, he had been a charcoal appraiser. This morning, he would be a novice clerk delivering year-end tribute reports. Paper stacked in a box on his back gave the lie weight. In his sleeve, a phrase committed to memory the night before. When the carp circles twice, the wind crosses east. It was not poetry. It was a trigger, to match inked characters embedded in a merchant ledger and determine which door to pass under before the sun cleared the spire of Tojo Temple. He exhaled once. A breath visible in the cold. Then moved. He traveled light. Straw sandals bound tight, inner soles lined with rice fiber. A stitched talisman from his elder tucked between his back and the message box, not for luck, but for calm. Every sound mattered. Cicadas had gone quiet for winter, but the calls of early traders, the clatter of wooden wheels over frost-hardened ruts, all shaped the perimeter of his journey. At the second milestone, he stepped aside to let a patrol pass. No words were exchanged. The guards did not look twice. His gait, his pack, the slight stoop of a ledger runner, each detail placed like ink on parchment. The sealed packet never left his person. By mid-morning he reached a tea stall outside Yabe's. The matron smiled, poured him water steeped with willow bark. "Long way to carry ink," she said. He nodded, added one phrase in the local dialect, just distinct enough, "Winter ends in the reeds." Her glance shifted. A second cup. Her sleeve brushed his as she placed it down. In her palm, a sliver of bark marked with pinholes. He took it with the cup, drank, then placed both down. Never looked back. At a bend beyond the stall, he paused beneath a camphor tree. Unrolled the bark fragment with gloved fingers. It bore only dots, but each mark corresponded to steps and timing, when to turn, when to stop, when to signal with a reed whistle cut the night before. The mission did not require a blade. It required precision. He moved again. Behind him, the wind shifted, carrying the cry of a rooster from the valley floor, late, off-tempo. He noted it. Everything had meaning. At a checkpoint south of Kyoto, the scribe spoke with a soft Mino accent and called himself Katsuro. The name belonged to a merchant's son who had died 5 years earlier in a fishing mishap near the Kazuriya River, his records repurposed for deep-cover runners. Names that aren't names held value. He wore a clerk's robe, plain gray, stained at the cuff to appear older than it was. His hair was tied like a temple registrar's, and his wooden seal matched a shop in Sanemiya, forged from careful observation and copied once with burned lacquer. The toll officer glanced at the ledger Katsuro carried. Noted the line items, barley, tax rice, 2 bolts of hemp. He grunted approval and waved him through. No questions. To move safely, the courier depended not on lies but on consistencies. A true name might change with every crossing, but habits, gait, and paper told a clearer story. He passed under the awning of a grain dealer's storehouse. The scent of crushed millet clung to the air. Inside, a coded receipt, a mitsumono, or secret report, was lodged in a broken counting rod near the far beam. He retrieved it while appearing to examine a box. The message was simple: avoid the Kamogawa Bridge at dusk. A patrol from the Western Army had shifted early. Shinobi, covert practitioners trained not for battle but for disruption, signaling, and infiltration, rarely used blades. Their survival came from seeing the whole board. He updated his route in silence. At a tannery by the riverbank, his presence triggered no concern. There, he traded a scrap of thread-wrapped paper for a coin and a nod from the stableman. The paper held no ink, only pressure marks formed by a blind stylus. Tilted in light, the indentation suggested meeting hours and the placement of a decoy cart. He moved before the bell tower struck the hour. The phrase from his sleeve had not yet been needed. But it shaped each decision. Every ledger he carried bore faint brush lines just above the third column, a code to verify the real from the replica. His finger would glide across the surface, his memory, not his eyes, would confirm it. A child bumped into him near Guion. He steadied her, smiled, and let the moment pass. Later, alone beneath a bridge support, he unfurled a thin parchment and copied 3 characters using water and ash. They would vanish within minutes. But the message would already be moving. In the heart of Kyoto, noise concealed clarity. Bamboo vendors sang price songs with 5-beat cadences. Laundry lines hung across alleys in colors that followed the pattern of the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. A red-blue-white sequence signaled one thing: move quickly. A shift to yellow implied pause. These were the signals. The courier passed beneath a row of eaves where silk was drying. The dye pattern had changed since morning, subtle, but precise. A triangle of plum blossoms now edged the bolt, replacing last night's fans. The fan had meant, rendezvous unchanged. Plum blossoms meant, move to fallback. He changed his course without breaking pace. At a noodle stand near Nijo Castle, the cook adjusted his umbrella twice, then once more. The order of movement confirmed that 2 watchers had arrived early. Another signal arrived by sound. A street peddler cried out for pickled radish, 3 syllables, then pause. Repeated twice, it meant nothing. 3 times, confirm relay point. His heart did not race. He simply turned onto a back lane and stepped into a dye house alcove. There, a folded square of parchment waited under a slat. Inside it, a map fragment showing a portion of the canal and a time mark. The courier studied it for 4 heartbeats, then burned it with an oil wick pressed into a cracked tile. Code passed in these ways because ordinary language was too costly. 1 day's delay could end a supply run. A mistimed diversion could draw sword against ally. And so, those who served as couriers and informants in the shadows used the world's daily rhythm as their script. The Bansen Shuki, a manual compiled decades later, would describe some of these methods. But even that record could not capture the pulse of a city breathing misdirection. By dusk, the courier walked past a shuttered fan shop. Its sign had been rotated. The crane faced west now. He paused. Inside the shadowed doorway, a man folded paper with one hand. The other rested beside a half-eaten orange. Neither looked up. The courier coughed softly, the rhythm rehearsed, low, high, low. The man nodded once, set the paper down, and walked out into the noise. In the small curashoin, a back-office room inside a quiet riverside storehouse, the courier laid out his tools. Charcoal ash, ground from the spent wick of an oil lamp. A dish of water thickened with rice starch. Fine hair brush, trimmed from the tail of a winter fox. Paper, not new, but peeled from the inside lining of a dry goods crate. He painted in silence. The message was 6 characters long. In daylight, it would look like watermarks. But as it dried, the rice-based ink would fade completely. To read it again required steam or a powder dusting with fine sand. Such materials were fragile. A single drop of rain, a wrong fold, and the characters dissolved. Sometimes, memory was safer. The courier pressed the dry sheet between 2 others and placed them inside a tax record folio. On the outside, a red lacquered seal of a local silk merchant, borrowed for the hour. The courier would return it before sunset. His route led him north through a spice yard where the air stung with pepper and dried citrus. At a paper gate, he was halted by a boy no older than 12. "Who do you carry for?" the boy asked. Ink, the courier replied. The boy stepped aside. In the courtyard, the courier turned once and scattered crushed ginger along the path. It masked footprints and warded off tracking dogs, a detail taught by his Kōga contact, who once served as a kennel assistant in Iwakuni. Inside a narrow chamber lit by lattice window, he retrieved a stone tablet bearing dried kanji impressions. He laid a thin sheet over it and rubbed charcoal to capture the raised text. Then, brushing away the excess, he whispered the memory phrase again, "When the carp circles twice, the wind crosses east." He folded the sheet, slid it into the lining of his sash, and stepped back into shadow. His tools left no scars. Only choices. The scent of roasted barley filled the air. The tea house near the Gojo Bridge was neither poor nor lavish, but it was chosen for one reason: acoustics. The floorboards creaked in rhythm with street traffic, masking the weight of steps inside. The private room had a view of the back alley and a concealed panel in the tatami frame, wide enough to pass a scroll. The courier entered with a tilt of his head that marked him as subordinate. He was served tea without words. The hostess adjusted the screen 3 times, then brushed her sleeve against a wind chime that did not ring. Its string had been cut. That was the signal. He waited one breath longer. Then passed a pouch containing 2 ledgers, one real, one salted with fabricated inventories meant to mislead a Tokugawa patrol if intercepted. A second man entered. Officially a dealer in ceramics, in practice, a former coastal mapmaker turned relay node. He examined the first ledger, ignored the second. "Rain in Hida?" he asked casually. "Only before sunrise," the courier replied. That was enough. The man extracted a small token from his sleeve, a carved bead shaped like a persimmon seed. The courier accepted it with both hands and placed it in the hidden corner of his belt sash. Each movement inside the tea house was measured. Footfalls softened by reed slippers. Conversation spaced between wool turns outside. Tea poured when a merchant cart clattered past. The courier excused himself with a bow. At the door, he hesitated. Through the slatted screen he spotted a familiar silhouette, an inspector from the southern tollway, passing by on his own errand. Timing changed everything. He turned down a corridor, exited through the kitchen, and stepped into the alley where barrels of soy mash hid a ladder to the roof. From there, Kyoto unfolded below, tiled and brown and shivering with steam. One false step and his path would be closed. One delay and the paper would cool too long to be read. But for now, each movement was matched to a pattern. Geometry of shadow. Tea house rhythm. The cart and the chime. The wind carried a faint scent of pine sap and ash. From the ridge above Kyoto's northeastern quarter, the courier crouched behind a thatched wall, watching for the signal plume. Below, the roofs of 3 merchant blocks shimmered with morning steam. Between them, a patrol moved on predictable routes, 2 men, 4 pauses, turning clockwise. He did not need to engage them. He needed to slow them. In the dry grass nearby, an oiled paper bundle waited, packed with pine dust, mustard seeds, and dried rhubarb. It would not harm. But it would burn thick and fast. At the 6th bell, he lit the fuse with a reed torch and walked away. Minutes later, smoke curled into the air in even pulses. From below, the patrol turned and advanced toward the column. Behind them, an informant disguised as a market porter stepped around a corner, unchallenged, and crossed into the inner district. The courier watched from a rooftop. The operation concluded with no voice raised, no weapon drawn. The hill quieted. A crow called once, then flew toward the temple ridge. Misdirection was not deception for deception's sake. Among the IGA and Kōga traditions, such actions were weighed carefully. Under the civil codes that governed Kyoto's districts, false alarms could be punished as provocations. But the courier's task was sanctioned, and the packet now safely inside the central relay house. He scattered ash with his sandal, burying the last trace of the burner. The child who would find it later would think it remnants of an old fire. Downhill, the roads reopened. Traders resumed their calls. A bell from Sanjosaka chimed. The courier breathed through his nose, slow and quiet. One more route secure. One more shadow drawn long enough to shelter its message. He adjusted the folds of his robe and turned toward the river path. A reed whistle at his side remained unused. It was afternoon when he reached the river crossing. The Uji waters ran shallow in winter, the current slow but treacherous beneath a thin glaze of ice. Ferrymen lined the bank, their straw cloaks soaked through, faces hidden under broad hats. One called out toll rates in clipped, rhythmic phrases, each fifth line matching the courier's code. The courier chose that boat. He stepped aboard with a roll of copied toll records tucked under his arm. Each line listed a cart or animal by weight, but one entry showed no goods, just a child's kite. That kite was real. It fluttered now on the far bank, held by a boy in an orange coat. The tail had 5 knots, then 2, then none, a direction, not decoration. As the boat drifted, the courier examined the ledger again. The paper grain ran counter to the writing, an added cue. He touched a stamp near the top corner. Its lacquer had dried rough, confirming its authenticity by texture. A woman aboard, pretending to adjust her basket, tapped her sandal twice against the planks. He glanced but did not meet her eyes. They disembarked in silence. On land, he followed the kite's direction uphill, past a prayer post and into a garden where laundry hung limp. Inside a woven bag tied to a tree limb, a wax-sealed scrap bore his next route. The parchment had curled slightly from damp, not enough to smudge, but enough to hurry him. He made one copy by memory alone, using a rice paper slip tucked in his sleeve. Then burned the original beneath a stone lantern. The boy with the kite let the string go. It lifted once, then vanished behind a roofline. By sundown, he would be inside Kyoto again. Paper had moved across river and district, ledger and play. But its power lay not in what it said. It was in how it traveled. Footfall, fold, and ferry. Dusk softened the corners of Kyoto. Temple bells rang in layered tones. Stall shutters closed in a staggered rhythm, each clap of wood like a wave folding into shore. The courier entered the lantern-lit alley near Nishigen. The second handoff waited. He walked without urgency. A brush vendor swept dust from his threshold with rhythmic flicks, 2 slow, 1 sharp, a prearranged code. The path was clear. In the alley's recess, a servant girl dropped a bundle of firewood. It split open at his feet. Inside the cloth, a packet and a dried persimmon. She bowed and left without a word. Half the message was in memory. The other half was here. He stepped into the shadow of a closed bathhouse. There, beneath a wooden slat, he retrieved a slip of mulberry paper. Its characters were written in syllables that matched a Tonka poem, each line holding numeric weight. 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. He matched syllables to map points. The last line referred to a shutter width in the Maruyama quarter. Before committing it to memory, he split the slip lengthwise. One half went into a lacquer tube, to be dropped into a merchant's incense crate by midnight. The other, rolled and tucked inside a bamboo fountain, would dissolve with morning's water flow, evidence erased with ritual. From the temple path above the alley, the courier caught a glance of a lantern moving too slowly. Not part of the plan. He cut right and entered a spice cellar, bowing low to an old man counting dried ginseng. "I'm here to collect for Tamanari," he said. The man paused, tapped 3 times on the counter. Then reached for a bag. "Tamanari doesn't pay in coin," the old man muttered. "He pays in weight." The courier nodded. Accepted the bag and stepped into the back, where a narrow door led to the canal path. There, he waited until the misaligned lantern passed. A patrol shift, possibly coincidence, possibly not. In the half-light of Kyoto's winter dusk, every pace mattered. He crossed the canal on a stepping-stone path used by grain carriers. Once on the other side, he turned east toward Maruyama. At a small shrine, he paused. Not to pray, but to watch the swing of the incense smoke. The flow bent south. The wind had shifted. That detail would determine which shutter to knock on, and when to kneel before it. The contact waited only 3 minutes, no more. 3 minutes meant success. 4 meant delay. 5 meant risk. He passed under the pine gate as the last bell echoed down the slope. The scroll was bound in red cord, tucked between layers of poetry and old court songs. To the untrained eye, it was an anthology, 100-verse chains passed down in salons, copied with care. But every syllable in the first 10 verses aligned with a coordinate system used among Kōga contacts, an ancient method of encoding location through rhythm and line count. The courier recognized it at once. The first line opened with a crane, the second with the moon. The fourth verse included a reed. These were not metaphors. They mapped to places, a ferry post shaped like a bird's foot, a courtyard with crescent tiles, and a flooded grove with winter reeds bent westward. He committed the structure to memory. But something had changed. A verse in the 6th stanza was off, too long by 1 syllable. An error, or an insertion. He examined the ink. Different grain. Newer. A later hand had added it. Inside that irregular line was the real message: East Gate closed, turn inland. Avoid the crescent path. That path was one of 3 escape lines from the drop point. The courier considered his options. At the end of the poem, a blank space, a pause. That meant decision. The original composer had left room for change. Before sunrise, he was meant to rendezvous with another contact near a lantern tower east of Fushimi. But now, one of the routes had collapsed. He checked the poem's ink once more. Confirmed the tremble in the brushwork. A signal from the poet agent that something had gone wrong. He had a choice. There were still 3 hours. The packet in his sash was not yet late. But one of their own had likely gone missing. To seek them would delay the drop, jeopardize the entire route. To continue would mean accepting that the ally might have already paid the cost of silence. He set the scroll down. Bowed once. Then walked toward the temple quarter, not the meeting point, but the garden behind the printmaker's house. There, in the soft snow beneath plum branches, he found no tracks. Only a folded sandal. It was enough. He knew the signal. Go forward. They would not return. The courier adjusted the strap on his message case. Turned toward the southern ridge, away from the broken route. He did not look back. The map that isn't a map would remain folded in poetry. Its final word, carry. The delivery came before the temple drums. Just past the 5th bell, the courier reached the gravel rise behind a granary southeast of Fushimi. Mist pooled in the shallow gullies. A rice merchant's guard dozed at the gate, unaware that the man walking past carried more than invoices. The final message, half committed to memory, half sealed inside a folded charm slip, was placed beneath the stone basin by the boundary marker. It would be found within the hour. That hour mattered. Because a column would turn aside before crossing the ridge. Because a detachment would shift to another post. Because one message, moved by foot and breath alone, had passed untouched. He sat beside the basin. Let the chill of the stone press through his robe. The first light broke over the rooftops. It struck the bell tower, then the upper ridges of the tiled storehouses. No banners rose. No voices shouted. But a task had ended. He removed one scrap from his sash. The last remnant of a route mark now obsolete. He held it to the oil wick. Flame touched paper. Smoke rose once, then vanished. What remained was the phrase. When the carp circles twice, the wind crosses east. He whispered it once more. Not to remember, but to let it go. Along the road, early vendors set up stands. A girl dragged a pail across stone. Two men debated the price of salt. No one looked his way. He passed through the streets slowly, the rhythm no longer urgent. Behind him, on paths traced through night, his footprints softened into the earth. No monument would mark this day. No chronicle would list his name. But the courier had changed the path of a march, the course of a plan, by never drawing a blade. Ink and silence. Paper and pace. Memory and restraint. At a small bridge near the edge of the city, he paused. Inside his sleeve, a new packet. No seal yet. No phrase. Just clean parchment and the weight of another task. He walked on. The city woke behind him.